Welcome back, everyone. I am the Depressed Dior, and this is Langrisser Mobile Apex Season 7. Alright, so we're up against Melkor. Before that, I'll always talk about my losses. I had two losses prior to this. One of them was against kind of an AoE single target, well, it was just a magic rushdown, essentially. I unfortunately just got kind of outplayed during the ban pick, and there wasn't really much I could do. And also I made some pretty dumb mistakes. Second match was against someone that had a Season 2 banner, so he was Langrisser at some point. Full on like assassin single target rushdown. That was his entire box. I actually had some pretty good luck with that, and unfortunately, where I got a breeze proc on my young Jessica, but it didn't help me in the end. And unfortunately, I also made a dumb mistake. I misclicked. I was planning on removing young Jessica's goddess buff, but instead I skipped turn and kind of screwed me over. Even with that, I probably would have still lost, though. In any case, Melkor here. Seems to be mostly focused on rushing in with AoE, but there is a smattering of single target as well. The reason why I kind of say it's kind of a rush focus is simply because there's a teleporter here with Hein, that's his name. Yeah, SP Hein here. We got extra mobility from Imelda as well as Akaya, who also can do a 30% attack buff. And the single targets are mostly from things like Elwyn, mostly just from Elwyn, to be honest. The Juggler could do some pretty nasty stuff with B-Shock. And then, of course, we have TRS here that can also help with attack blessing. Oh, and of course, there's a Yulia down there. So a little bit of everything. It's not super cancerous, so it's not the worst thing I've seen. As for the box, no changes of the box, but my Patseer is 6 stars. I did do a bunch more summons on the Patseer banner and managed to get her up to 6 stars. My main focus was to get her to 6 stars and or get a few more of those shards that you can use to transfer. I'm hoping to make some future summons a little bit easier on me. I also did a few equipment summons, which is dumb, never do that, but I did it anyway because I'm not smart. Anyway, onwards. I guess one thing to point out on my previous two matches is they banned my Hilda first, and banning my Hilda first hurts. It's actually kind of hard to deal with. Because then they just ban young Jessica, and then I'm kind of in a rough spot as far as like buffs are concerned. It's not the end of the world. It's not as bad as like my previous seasons, because I still have characters that can do attack blessing. Or not attack blessing, but attack buffs. But it's still pretty rough, because usually they follow up with banning young Jessica and then one of my long range characters, usually Illustrial. But this person banned my Rosen CL, which, as always, I don't really care if they ban my Rosen CL usually. Went straight for Juggler. This is really good, because I banned their Ares first, because Ares was probably the most painful to deal with, because I didn't really have an answer for him whenever he does so much damage against my my squishier characters. So Juggler, out of everything that's in here, is the least threatening for me. I mean, yeah, he's a tank, yeah, he can teleport and do the stupid AoE and B-Shock and all that, but compared to everything else, I can deal with Juggler now. I'm comfortable dealing with Juggler. And since I don't do AoE anyway, his talent is not that dangerous as far as undoing any damage. So I was like, alright, I'll get rid of Ringin, and I went and got rid of SP Hein immediately, because he does have teleport. And also he does some pretty nasty AoE, and his terrain manipulation will make it so you lose mobility, which isn't a big deal for Hilda, but it's a big deal for everyone else who wants to close the distance. So since they left me with Hilda, I usually prioritize Hilda over Freya now, simply because her buff is more useful. That, and honestly, reincarnation characters are pretty crazy right now, and I kind of have more reincarnation than origins at this point. So getting Hilda kind of gives me a lot more options overall. They went straight for Elwyn. I don't know why, but some people do this, where they grab Elwyn first, or grab Elwyn pretty quickly after I grab someone that's obviously going to be a spear. So I was like, this is perfect, because I was more concerned about all this AoE. So I was like, alright, well, I'll get rid of Bozel, get rid of Yulia, get rid of the magic damage, because Hilda doesn't do as well against magic. They did ban Rosen CL, and they banned my long range characters. They still left me technically 3 healers. I was definitely very interested in getting Florentia as soon as possible, but I didn't really want to give that away yet, so I went and grabbed Marielle. because against Juggler, Mariel just wrecks Juggler, so it's great. Went after my long-range assassins. Went Arian Rod. Now, something to note about Arian Rod is I actually went during this ban pick. I actually opened Langrisser and looked up Arian Rod to see what her factions were because I could never remember. She's like Time, Reincarnation, and whatever the eyeball one, the white one is. I don't remember what that one's called. Oh, Mystic. The Mystic faction. There are no Mystic faction buffers, no Time faction buffers, and there's no reincarnation. There is a reincarnation faction buffer with Hilda. So for the most part, Arian Rod's source of buffs is probably from Ikaya or Imelda or that combination. So keeping that in mind, I went ahead and banned TRS because I didn't want to deal with any of that passive healing nonsense. Ledin, of course, he does his stupid 3C I didn't want to deal with. So I went ahead and grabbed Florentia at this point. I was actually torn because I really wanted to grab Towa at this point because Towa, my plan was to use Towa to kill Arian Rod at this point. Because if Arian Rod has no faction buff, I can bypass guard. So I went ahead and grabbed Florentia just to make sure I had her. This actually worked out perfectly because my opponent just banned 2 of my healers that I had no intention of picking. So I was completely okay with that. They grabbed a Kaya, so I was like, alright, they're going to try to do some rushdown nonsense. At this point, I actually banned Hilda because I did not want Arian Rod to have a faction buff. And I got rid of their act again, essentially. I was kind of torn a little bit because I'm concerned about Imelda's 3C, but with what's on the field right now, if any sort of single target were to come my way, it'll probably be cavalry, and everything else is not going to be swords or anything like that, so Hilda should be able to tank it no matter what. At this point, I went ahead and grabbed Towa. And I was definitely considering grabbing Patsir at this point, since there's 2 male characters, and Patsir definitely wrecks Juggler pretty hard as well. But my opponent did ban Patsir as well as my young Jessica, leaving me with Shaltir and Freya. So I can either go with a second tank, or I can grab Shaltir, who doesn't have any sources of buffs unless I take an attack buff with Florentia. But Shaltir, with her talent, actually has pretty high stats as long as she's at 100% HP, so there's definitely some potential there. They take Rosenseal. They didn't really have a healer, and I don't plan on letting them stay alive long enough to be healed. So, opponent. Kaya actually took Dark Reaper, and then has Wild Power in the Blood of Sheikah, so definitely the usual combo for getting the AoE 30% attack buff with +2 movement. Doesn't have the teleport wolf ability though. Rosenseal didn't take the crystal, didn't take our 3C, instead just went pure healing support. Arian Rod, standard Arian Rod, all AoEs. Juggler here, of course, went pretty standard. No faction buff, something to note. And Elwyn actually took a faction buff as well. So technically, Rosenseal could have brought her faction buff and covered Elwyn and gave him an additional ability to play around with, but apparently didn't go that direction. Juggler not having a faction buff is a bit rough, to be honest, because there's not even a defensive buff to play around with in this. Standard Shaltir with Steel Mane Werewolves. Towa, I'm going Griffin Knights as usual for higher attack, and took Supremacy Strike. 3C, or not 3C, Supremacy Strike is not our 3C, but so I can guard bypass to kill Arian Rod. Obviously I took the 3C and Tactical Guidance for the extra 5 movement. And then Florentia, I went ahead and dropped her 3C and just took heal just in case. I wasn't really, I was just a little concerned of possibly being ganged up on, so I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. So just in case, I brought an actual heal instead of relying on AoE heals. Hilda, pretty standard, took War Goddess because I usually expect melee attacks. And then, of course, we got Mariel, standard Mariel with her standard attacks and Enduring Faith for extra movement. Went with Zealot Troops because I do have a faction buff. Alright, let's dive right into this. So, really, I'm kind of just, I counted out spaces, took into account the +2 movement that Akaya could possibly provide. So in this case, yeah, so with Akaya's buff, Arian Rod could definitely get into range, but I wasn't super concerned about it at this point because she already moved. so I didn't really have anything to worry about too much. Elwyn also went Steelwing Warriors and not Unicorns, so his mobility is actually not fantastic right now, which I guess I didn't really take into full account. I was actually counting out spaces based off him having 4 movement across this, but he actually can't move that well across Swamp right now. So Shaltir, I could have pushed Shaltir about much further at this point in the match. So Eternal Light, nothing too special. Oh yeah, it buffs Akaya. I never remember that she's a Glory faction. So at this point, I went ahead and went on the attack. I really wanted to wait a little bit. So you can see, even with the guard from Juggler, I bypass it because Arianor has no faction buff, and I do have a faction buff. Easily destroy her. Did provide her with a wolf, but I didn't really care. So, as I was saying, one thing I was considering doing was pushing up with Shaltir first, and then using her as the jump off point for tactical guidance, because that would give her some much needed buffs. But I was very concerned about Akaya possibly moving up, doing Blood of the Chica, and then blocking Towa, because Arianor was right here. If Akaya moved here, I would not be able to attack her. So with that in mind, I was like, alright, well, I'm not going to worry about it then, and just go straight for the kill. Obviously, she's now in no man's land. I did go with the attack buff for her 3C. Dark Reaper. So I'm just checking a few things. Her defense is actually pretty decent, 740. So, not too shabby, actually. Yeah, so the wolf actually tried to attack. Went as well as you expected it to. Which conveniently gave Florentia an extra stratagem. So did the plus movement stratagem for low mobility characters, just so I can have Marielle up and ready. And so yeah, I miscounted steps because I kept thinking Elwyn had more movement than he did across the swamp. So B-Shock to finish off Towa, not a big deal. Honestly, the trade worked out really well. I used up his B-Shock, he only has his 3C left. And then of course there's Elwyn, which Elwyn can't do anything to Hilda. So really the only danger is if Juggler guard blocks Hilda and then Elwyn starts attacking. But I have plenty of time to fix that issue. So first I went ahead and moved in with Hilda. I was really kind of seeing what order my opponent was going to use up with their characters. So healing up Juggler. So like I mentioned before, Juggler has no buffs besides Triton. Yeah, everything else is just from things like, was that Miracle? Yeah, Miracle. And then a bunch of just increased attack from B-Shock. So his defenses aren't that great. Yeah, 777. Like Towa had almost as much defense without any benefits from water. So I went ahead and moved in with Hilda so I can have a spot for Shaltir. Shaltir, I was actually going to go ahead and do an act again to jump off of. Elwyn decided to attack and do Sword Soul. I'm guessing possibly hoping to do heal negation. Of course, I have a blood pack, so it doesn't really matter. I did dispel her her guard buff, but it doesn't really matter because there's no real attackers that could get in range besides Akaya. And I'm going to go ahead and just heal up. And Akaya's already used her Reaper, so she could do some damage, which would actually help a little bit. But instead, she just stays back. The reason why it would help is if Shaltir goes below 100% HP, her stats actually drop drastically. Yeah. Also, all those wolves are killing. Not only does it give a stratagem, it also gives a 2% buff to all soldier stats, and that's stackable up to 5. So at 100% HP, my Steelman werewolves are doing, you know, they have about 1200 attack right now, which is not anything compared to Zealots right now. But even without, like, with a faction buff, Muriel's at 1503, and without a faction buff at full HP, Shaltir's at 1530. With a faction buff, she would easily get over 1700. Shaltier just definitely can do some damage. Obviously, the limitations is usually because she's a spear, and it's kind of hard to keep her at 100% HP in the AoE meta. In any case, went ahead and tacked in place. Did her 3C. Didn't ensure I get a kill on Elwyn. And then I went ahead and used this opportunity. I went ahead and just did a regular attack here. Which of course will get rid of the commandment. Also killing there allowed the Divine Threat to proc. I essentially, with that, in combination with her hammer and her 3C, she dispelled every single one of Juggler's buffs. As you can see, it does quite a bit of damage. I think the only thing that saved him was he probably has a Last Rites equipped, and he was at full HP. So, moves in to kill Marielle. My Shaltier, of course, had that extra action, so I went ahead and moved in. Went to melee just to ensure that I get healed from this. So they'll heal her back to full. And then I move in to go ahead and finish off at Kaya, because I got my second action because of Blood Frenzy. Yeah, and at this point they have a Wolf and Rosen Seal. So my opponent's gonna probably give up like that. So yeah, not too bad. Yeah, Shaltier actually did the most damage, just simply because she's just able to get it. She got extra actions and all that. Obviously, I traded a bunch of characters, but since they're really only 2 DPS, and I mean, Akai can do some damage, but she's not really meant for attacking. Usually, she's usually used for support. So trading my units for their Aryan Rod and their Juggler essentially just left them with Elwyn, and even then, Elwyn just attacked my spears for no reason, so it didn't really do much. Funny enough, Shaltier got the most healing, just simply from her passive, where she heals whenever she attacks in melee. Besides that, not much else to note. As always, my tank doesn't actually take much damage, she's just kind of there to buff. But it is what it is. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.